Yo, what's good? Welcome to another episode of Rooftop Sessions. My name is Gila, and today we're going to be talking about. Today we're going to be doing a book review, and the book is The Surrender Experiment by Michael A. Singer. So, just to preface why I'm talking about this book today, I think this book is very interesting because it really delves into the spiritual aspect of life and spiritual experiences from a very different perspective. You don't hear a lot of Americans talking about this, at least from the books I've read. Maybe there's a lot of books like this, but from my knowledge, I've never read a book like this. I've never heard of a book like this. So it's a very unique perspective. A lot of the spirituality and yogic experiences come from India, mostly India, Nepal, maybe Thailand, maybe Bhutan, but not really from the Western world, not really from America. And so without further ado, let's get to it. So the book follows an autobiography format in the first person perspective. And basically, Michael takes us through his spiritual journey of surrendering to life. At pretty much several significant stages in his life, he basically walks us through how those events sort of formed a chain and one thing led to another. And by the end of it, he sort of got what he was asking for in the beginning, which was sort of, to summarize, to reduce his ego and to let go of a sense of I and a sense of attachment and to feel inner peace. That was his objective from the beginning, from what I understood. So Michael starts off the book by tracing back the first moment where this entire journey with surrender started. So he traced it back to when he was a graduate student at the University of Florida in Gainesville. And he was sitting in his living room apartment and he was having a conversation, just a normal day-to-day conversation with his brother-in-law. And for the first time in his life, he was able to witness his thoughts and his mind from a distance. So basically, he was not connected with his mind. He was not his mind. It was a separation, right? There was two separate entities. There was the mind and the thoughts, and there was the observer. And it made him realize that there's a lot of unnecessary chatter and there's a lot of unnecessary noise going on in his mind. So he started obsessively trying to find answers to his question, how do I reduce this voice and keep the stillness in the mind? So he went to the library and he was looking through books about psychology and psychiatry, and he didn't find any answers. Dead end. So then he started talking to his friends about it, and his persistence paid off. A couple of days later, one of his friends gave him a book on the 3 pillars of Zen Buddhism. So that led him to start practicing meditation when he was traveling around in the forests of Florida, and also a trip that he took to Mexico. And when he went to Mexico, he began to start ignoring these thoughts of anger, frustration, depression, and fear. So Michael described the experience of witnessing these emotions and not indulging in them. For the first time in his life, he didn't indulge in them. He did the opposite. He surrendered to the emotions and the experience, but at the same time, he went against it and did the exact opposite. He did the positive thing. So for example, when he was camping in Mexico, he gives a very detailed account of how he was meditating in the fields of Mexico, and there were a few men on horseback who approached him. His eyes were closed, but his mind was active. His mind was afraid. It was saying danger, fear. They're going to steal my stuff. They're going to hurt me, right? They're going to rob me. They're going to mug me. But he didn't give in to those thoughts. He continued his practice. He kept closing his eyes. And eventually, when he opened his eyes, these people were so kind. They took him home and they fed him and they introduced him to their community, their culture. They were actually farmhands or farm workers on a farm owned by a private owner in Mexico. They were very poor, modest people, but they were very heartwarming and they had a very tight-knit community and a sense of family, which Michael really hadn't seen in America, and he describes this in the book. But that was really his first encounter with surrender. And from that point on, he was obsessed with it. So with some money he had saved up, Michael bought a piece of land and built a small meditation hall or a home for him, basically, where he practiced yoga and meditation, and he followed a pretty rigorous routine. And he was also teaching classes part-time at the University of Florida in economics, and he was a very popular teacher at this time. Eventually, he stumbled upon the autobiography of a yogi by Paramahamsa Yogananda, and this book changed his life. He began to see Paramahamsa Yogananda as sort of a guru or sort of inspiring light in his life. And after that moment, people started coming to the meditation center and participating in meditation practices, chanting, things of that nature. And it slowly began to grow. And at the same time, Michael either finished his classes or left his classes at the University of Florida. And by chance, he got the opportunity to build a home for a police officer. The police officer admired the building and said, "Can you build one of these for me?" And of course, Michael's mind was saying, no, why would I want to do that? I get no benefit from it. But he said yes through surrendering. and he built a property for this police officer, and that started a chain of events where he eventually ended up having his own construction company, which he called Built with Love. And in the book, he states that as the company began to grow, the quality of the projects grew, and he felt his sense of I being let go slowly through these projects and surrendering to the flow of life. And so when this construction company was really growing and really thriving, he found himself one day at a Radio Shack, and he picked up one of those old, I think it was probably in the 80s, one of those 80s computers, and he taught himself programming. And he was talking to the owner of Radio Shack, and he showed him the program that he made, all self-taught. And the Radio Shack owner was really impressed and sent it out to a bunch of his contacts and clients. And this landed Michael several programming jobs. And as with his construction business, it was sort of like a one after another thing where he was just getting more and more jobs, and it was growing, and he was getting employees. All these people were coming and working for him. And so a real pivotal moment was when he got the chance to write a program for a medical managing system. So this program ended up becoming WebMD, which I'm sure a lot of you have used in your lifetime. So this story is absolutely remarkable. Through the acts of surrender, the company keeps growing. They get more and more projects, and they get a massive property in Florida, and they become one of the top medical systems in all of America. And eventually, they merge with WebMD, forming one of the biggest medical managing systems in America. And so at this point, Michael is in a very great position in his life. But as the saying goes, at great heights, there's a long fall down. So what happens is, as he's like the CEO of this company, he gets framed for money laundering and tax evasion. So he goes through an 8-year court battle where he's basically being framed by this guy, Bobby, and he's spreading lies and fabricating them in a very, very manipulative way that makes Michael and the other board members look guilty, where Bobby took the plea deal, went to jail for a year. He got off free, basically, after that, for giving this information to the US government. I forgot to mention, this was being investigated by the US government because this was one of the biggest companies in the United States at the time. So the case extended for a long time. The judge was dropped. They got a new judge at the 11th hour, and it looked like they were going to be guilty because the jury was finding them guilty. But again, at the last moment, the case was dropped by the US government, and he walked free. It was literally a miracle. I'm not giving it justice in my explanation. In the book, if you read it, there are several emotional ups and downs. It's a very difficult situation because, if you get found guilty, it's like 20, 30 years prison time. I don't know exactly what it was, but it wasn't really a certain event or circumstance which led to his freedom. It was sort of just essentially accepting what was happening in life and letting it go and letting life take its own course and its own flow instead of him being afraid and giving into that fear and anxiety. And kudos to him. I think in that situation, I feel like a lot of people would be really nervous and afraid about what's going to happen. So he was able to maintain an even keel state of mind because of his art of surrendering, his experiment with surrender. So at the end of the book, Michael says that he found inner peace through all of these years of surrendering to the flow of life rather than asserting his will and getting upset with his ego and trying to control something that is largely uncontrollable. And I found this really powerful because he was able to just let go of his sense of I and let nature take its course as it naturally does with everything else, right? Animals don't do anything. Animals are behaving like animals. Animals are part of nature. It's us humans who decide we're going to do this and we're going to do that. So he was able to sort of surrender to the flow of life, and it shows how beautiful it made it for him. And it was not only positive experiences, even the negative experiences reduced the sense of I and led to a more universal focus where the flow of life is controlling everything. So my main takeaways from this book were that the ego is usually trying to sabotage us most of the time. The ego does not act in our best interest. The fear, the anxiety, the anger, the depression, all these negative emotions that we feel, they serve a purpose. But at the same time, if we indulge in them, they can take us way off the course. They can take us in several different directions, which in turn does lead us back to the right place, and it does evolve us spiritually and as human beings, but it's a lot more painful. So it's basically flowing with the stream or flowing upstream. Both choices are going to end up in the same location. Even if you flow upstream, you're going to end up in the same location in the river. So when you flow with the stream, there's a lot less resistance and there's a lot less tension, and life just becomes a lot easier. And so the second takeaway from this book was that life has a plan for all of us. And even though that plan may not necessarily be positive, even the majority of the time, when you sort of step back, detach, surrender, and watch from a distance, it becomes a lot easier to accept and let go of so many things which are out of our control. All the good things that come out of hard work, that come out of dedication, out of persistence and perseverance, are the result of a certain set of circumstances that had to go right for that to happen. Even when things go bad by our own decisions and our own choices, and even things out of our control, and these things are also happening in a certain way. And if you just take a step back and look at what's happening, there is a very positive benefit that can be gained from every negative experience. Every negative experience is an opportunity for growth, is an opportunity for excellence, is an opportunity to study oneself and move forward in life. So I want to leave you guys with that positive message. If you're experiencing some extreme difficulties right now, whether that's financial, whether that's emotional, whether that's in terms of relationships, whether that's in terms of career, whatever difficulties that you're going through, if you take a step back and you just look at it and look at the entire picture from where it started to where it is now, and the probability of where it can go from here, there's less attachment of that experience with the ego. And that in turn brings more clarity, more wisdom, and more peace when you look at the situation. Even when you look at the positive experience from a distance, there's a sense of humility, there's a sense of reverence, there's a sense of gratitude to the force of life for providing those specific set of circumstances to allow these events to take place. If any of you guys have read the book and have had a similar interpretation or even a different interpretation, let me know what you guys thought about the book in the comments below. So I thank you guys all for watching another episode of Rooftop Sessions. My name is Gilla. If you like this video, leave a like, subscribe to this channel for more. I'll catch you guys next time.